Now we are going to classify the bacteria based on their. Now we are done with their cell wall, we are done with their morphology. Now we are going to talk about their atmospheric requirements. So the atmospheric requirements also groups bacteria into various forms. So we have the obligate aerobes. We have the anaerobes. We have the micro aerophiles. Okay. We have the micro aerophiles. So let's talk about the obligate aerobes. So obligate aerobes are bacteria that require strict amounts of oxygen in order to survive or in order to reproduce and grow. So those are the obligate aerobes. So the obligate aerobes. So let's represent the OA with obligate aerobes. So the obligate aerobes, they require room air or an atmospheric oxygen that is similar to room air, which is about, we have a 20 to 25 5% of what, of oxygen in the room air. So they require strict amounts of oxygen in order to survive. So when we talk about the Microbacteriaceae or the Mycobacterium species, they are examples of obligate aerobes. So when we say obligate, we are being specific. They require oxygen in order for them to thrive. So obligate what, aerobes. So obligate aerobes, we talk about the mycobacteria species. Okay, that these are obligate aerobes. Now we have, let's talk about the micro aerophiles. The micro aerophiles. So the micro aerophiles, they also require an amount of oxygen, but they require an amount of oxygen less than the room air, which is only up to 5%, 5% oxygen of what? Of room air. So they require 5%, a lesser amount of oxygen that is found in room air. So they require only 5% or a little amount of oxygen in order for them to what? In order for them to thrive. Okay. So examples of microaerophiles, organisms that are under microaerophiles, we have the Neisseria gonorrhoeae. So the Neisseria gonorrhoeae is an example of what, microaerophiles. When we are capturing such organisms, we don't give them too much oxygen, but just a less or a small percentage of oxygen. Now let's talk about the anaerobes. Anaerobes. So basically or generally, anaerobes do not require oxygen for them to grow. Their bacteria do not require oxygen for them to grow. But then anaerobes can be varied. There are certain bacteria that tolerate certain amounts of oxygen, and there are certain bacteria that does not tolerate at all. So because of that, the anaerobes has been grouped into other categories. So we have the aerotolerants. The aerotolerants. We have the obligate anaerobes. We have the aerotolerant. Then we have the obligate what, anaerobes. Okay, so finally we have the facultative anaerobes. That is facultative anaerobes. Then we have facultative anaerobes. Alright, so under the anaerobes, we have aerotolerants, obligate anaerobes, and facultative anaerobes. So the aerotolerants, as the word goes, tolerants, they are able to tolerate some amount of oxygen. They don't really need oxygen to survive, but then when you give them some quantity of oxygen, it doesn't matter, they can still not survive. So these are aerotolerants, they can tolerate oxygen. Then we have the obligate anaerobes. So for the obligate anaerobes, they require strict absence of oxygen. So they are strictly what, anaerobic. So they don't need oxygen to survive. They are anaerobes. If you deprive it of oxygen, it will grow so well. So those are what obligate anaerobes. Then we have facultative anaerobes. For the facultative anaerobes, whether you give it oxygen, whether you don't give it oxygen, it will still survive. So with the presence or absence of oxygen, the facultative anaerobes can survive. And most of the bacteria that we have, that we culture in clinical setting, falls under this facultative anaerobes. Most of them are facultative anaerobes. So we can talk about the members of the Enterobacteriaceae. They all fall under what? Facultative anaerobes. Okay. All right. Then finally, we'll talk about the capnophiles. The capnophiles. Capnophiles. So capnophiles. So for the capnophiles, they require a strict amount of carbon dioxide in order for them to grow. So for them, CO2. So mostly in the microbiology setting, you see them as culturing some of the bacteria with under CO2 jar. Because they strictly require carbon dioxide in order for them to thrive. So those are about the capnophiles. Alright. Now, let's go to, we have the based on temperature. So, based on temperature, we have bacteria can be distinguished into two. We have the psychotrophs. We have the psychophiles. We have the mesophiles. We have the thermophiles. And we have the hyperthermophiles. Okay, so all these ones are based on temperature ranges. So from 0 degrees Celsius to 15 degrees Celsius are organisms that are psychotrophs. The organisms that are what? That are psychotrophs. And then from 15 degrees Celsius going up 25 degrees Celsius. 25 degrees Celsius are what we call the psychophiles. They are the psychophiles. So organisms that can thrive within this range are psychophiles. And then the mesophiles, most organisms are found within the mesophiles. So the mesophiles, we can say they are about 20, so they are about, let's say, 15 degrees Celsius to 35 degrees Celsius. So those are the mesophiles. Then we have the thermophiles. So the thermophiles, we are going deeper. So that one we can talk about 55 degrees Celsius to 65 degrees Celsius. So those are what the thermophiles. Then we have the hyperthermophiles. So greater than 65 degrees Celsius. Those are the hyperthermophiles. Okay. So organisms, we have bacteria based on this one. So most of the bacteria we culture during bacterial microbiology falls within these mesophiles. The 15 degrees Celsius to 35 degrees Celsius. They falls within this category. Okay. 15 degrees Celsius to 35 degrees Celsius. Alright. And then the hyperthermophiles, they are so high, extreme, greater than 65 degrees Celsius and above. Those are hyperthermophiles. So that is classification of bacteria based on what? On temperature. Alright. So we have bacteria that can survive under extreme environment. Okay. Then let's talk about based on nutritional requirement. So based on nutritional requirements, we have the fastidious, and then we have the non-fastidious. So for the fastidious, they require specific nutrients in order for them to grow. So Haemophilus influenzae is an example of fastidious. So H. influenzae is an example of fastidious. So they require specific nutrients. In the H. influenzae, for instance, it requires either a blood agar or a chocolate agar for it to grow so well. And then for the non-fastidious, they don't require any specific amount of nutrients. They can grow in most of the media. So that is based on what nutritional requirement. And then finally, we are going to talk about based on their pathogenicity. So based on pathogenicity. So based on pathogenicity, we have pathogenic and non-pathogenic. The non-pathogenic can also be normal flora. Okay. So we have the pathogenic. We have the pathogenic, then we have the non-pathogenic. Non-pathogenic. We have the pathogenic and non-pathogenic. So the pathogenic, they are able to cause disease, or they are disease-causing microorganisms. And then the non-pathogenic, they are mostly normal flora. So normal flora. So the pathogenic, you can mention any other bacteria that can cause disease, any bacteria that can cause disease. So most members of the Enterobacteriaceae, friends, you can talk about the Staphylococcus, the Streptococcus, most of them can cause what disease. And the non-pathogenic to the normal flora, there are a lot of them in our gastrointestinal tract. And even there are some organisms that are normal flora, but then when they assume a different location in the body, they become pathogenic. They are normal flora in us, but when they assume a different location in the body, they begin to what? Become pathogenic. Alright, so that is it for the classification of bacteria. Alright, thank you very much for joining us in this session. See you in our next video. Goodbye.